Couldn't he have prevented this? Absolutely, he could have. He could have spoken it out of existence like that. But it turns out that no matter what he does, no matter how miraculous it is, no matter how incredible it is, it turns out that people still wouldn't believe. And at the end of the day, keeping you from death or disease or sickness is not his goal. Jesus never came to heal. Jesus said, I am come to seek and to save that which was lost. Now, did he heal people? Absolutely. But he would rather heal them of their sin sickness than to heal them of their lameness. He would rather heal them of their eternal condition of being sinful creatures bound for hell. He'd rather cure that and offer them salvation than to open their eyes to see or their ears to hear or to help them to walk again or to rise up even from the dead. We have looked at circumstances and acted like circumstances are the most important thing. And circumstances aren't even important at all. I have a good friend. His name is Daniel. Daniel works for a camp that we've been a part of before. And he was born without any arms. It's a birth defect. And I look at his life and I think of all the things he could do in his life. He could sit around and be miserable forever. But you know what he does? He does everything. He lives totally, it blows my mind. He lives totally independently. He dresses himself and bathes himself and cooks food, takes care of himself, everything using only his feet. In fact, when we met, he picked us up in a van. He was the driver in the van. And when we met him and we thought, here's your driver, and we're introduced to a man with no arms, I will admit a brief hesitation and maybe perhaps a backwards chuckle, trying to think like, are you serious right now? And you know what? He was a great driver. He was the coolest driver you could imagine. He was just perfectly paced and just did a great job driving us through the mountains of North Carolina and got us right to the camp, no problems at all. Even putting his toes up on the wheel and moving the wheel with his toes, he'd even lift a toe to wave at people when they went by, right? This is one cool character. He could have let his circumstances ruin his life. And he could have sat there and been miserable, and he could have been just crusty and filled with hate, and he could have seethed and been angry at God in all of his life. And you know what? Not one person would have blamed him for that. Not one person would have said, I can't believe he's like that. Everyone would have understood it. But you know what he realized? That circumstances are just circumstances. They're just an opportunity for God to do something incredible and something amazing. They're just one more opportunity for God to do something miraculous in our lives. And so here's what I would say to you. Instead of letting circumstances dictate, this is the idea of running this race. Instead of letting the course dictate how happy you are with God, trust instead the course architect. Instead of letting circumstances ruin how we view God, instead let us view that God is an overcomer, that God is already providing the solution to our problem, that God has already cured this thing. He's already delivered us from problems we haven't even dreamt up yet, things we don't even understand yet. You think this is the worst circumstance you can be in? Read the rest of Hebrews chapter 12. You're going to find out that even when we're enduring punishment and chastisement, it's a sign that God loves us. You ask me how I know my mom and dad love me? Because when I was good, they praised me. When I did the right things, they praised me. And they loved on me and they appreciated it. And when I did the wrong things, and since this is an official record, I will have to admit, there were probably at least 2 or 3 times in my whole growing up time that I might have done the wrong thing. 2 or 3 times at the most, per day, per hour, per minute. And when I did something wrong, they chastised me. They disciplined me. And I never once enjoyed it. I never once enjoyed it. But every single time I appreciated it. Because they were helping me to become who they knew I needed to be. They were helping me to understand that through discipline, they were demonstrating that they love me more than they love themselves. Because it's always easier to let a spoiled child run around than it is to stop and correct them. It's exhausting to correct children. It's exhausting to put up with that, but why mom, but why dad question for hours and hours and hours. It's exhausting to stay on top of every moment of every day, to help them do all the 10,000 things. In my current life right now, I feel like I am some sort of a janitor at my house, and my job is to walk around and close doors and turn off lights. I walk around the house yelling at nothing and speaking and mumbling to myself because the pantry door is left open and the lights are left on. I have grown-up children, and they simply cannot grasp the concept of closing a door and turning off a light. I know it sounds simple to you, but apparently it's not as simple as I think it is. And I could let it go. I could come behind them and close every door, and I could turn off every light for them. It's not a big deal. I love my children. I would do anything for them. But if I truly love them, then I have to stop what they're doing and say, this isn't okay. This isn't the right way to live. Closing doors and turning off lights might not seem like a big deal, but it's a part of a pattern of understanding how to live your life every day. And I want my kids to understand that living a disciplined life is important. So circling back to where we started this conversation, the world is going to try to convince us that God is angry at us, or that if God was such a great God, he would have just not let this happen. This isn't a judgment or a condemnation of God, folks. This is us getting more of what we deserve and forgetting that we don't have this every day, that this isn't the everyday normal situation. Like this isn't, look, we're not sitting around thinking this is this year's virus. We're not sitting around thinking this season's virus. This is weird. This is abnormal. I don't think any of us can remember a time when we were shutting down stores or closing malls or sending kids home from school for such a protracted period of time. I don't think any of us has that experience. Maybe, but pretty rarely. This is rare. And the fact that it's rare is God's grace in action. In spite of it being what we deserve because of our sinful choices, God gives us such grace constantly that this is a rarity to us. So don't think about that. Let me give you one more analogy. I work on computers, and I've spent a lot of years learning about computers and digging into the insides of computers. And when I hang around with people that aren't that familiar with how computers work, they say things to me like, doesn't it frustrate you when they mess up sometimes? I say to them, the more I learn about computers, the more I ask myself this question. I'm surprised they ever work at all. Do you recognize the coordinated miracles that have to happen for you to press a button on the front of a computer and that thing to actually turn on? Do you realize that we're tricking sand into pretending like it knows how to think? Do you recognize how crazy complicated computers are? I mean, it's insane. I could talk to you for hours and you'd thoroughly enjoy it, I'm sure, about the intricacies of every single detail of how our computer works. But suffice it to say this, the more I find out about it, I'm surprised they ever work at all. I'm not surprised they mess up. I'm surprised they don't mess up more often. That's also my view of our sin-sick world. I'm surprised we don't have more tornadoes and more hurricanes and more epidemics and pandemics. I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. I'm surprised that these things aren't the norm, because if we look at our world, we're constantly pushing God farther and farther away. We're constantly pushing him out of our lives. We're constantly telling him to leave us alone and let us do it on our own. We're big kids now. We got charge of our lives. We can do this. We can handle it. And then the first inkling, the first tiny dose of reality that sets in, and all of the spoiled children begin to point a finger at God and say, how dare you, God? How dare you, God?